With the first pick, with the second pick, with the third pick, with the fourth pick.
So we're going to move on to another prospect, another one of my favorites in the draft. I hadn't heard much about him until I saw someone on Twitter actually posted about him. And if you don't follow at NBA Draft Scouting, so it's at NBA DRAFT Scouting with no G, so SCOUTIN. I think he might have ran out of space when he was coming up with the handle, which is okay. But if you don't follow him, you should, because there's some great content there. But he's real high on Vrenz Bleijenbergh. And Vrenz is a 6'10", 170-pound player with, I called him, maybe a power forward with dual forward potential. He's an initiator. We'll get into that. But in 26 minutes a game, he averaged 9.46 points per game, 3.5 assists, 2.5 turnovers, 4.8 rebounds, shot 37% from the field, 33% from three on 5.2 attempts. And he was a 67% free throw shooter. Another guy, I don't feel like numbers quite do him justice. Jordan, I'll kick it off and talk about, I'll just give you a general overview, not necessarily a summary, but he's a guy that you could label a unicorn, a potential unicorn, right? 6'10" guy that can drive. He can knock down from deep, and he's got some passing chops to go along with it.
Yeah, absolutely. My favorite thing about him is his playmaking, and the numbers don't do it justice. A gifted and willing passer. He is a guy that in transition really loves finding his open teammates. He doesn't get tunnel vision, not afraid of any tight window. And he had some turnover issues for a little bit there. But that shows he's not afraid to try any pass out and see if he can fit it in. Nice touch on lob and entry passes. There were several plays where I expected him to drive, and then he pulled back at the last minute and delivered a really nice lob pass. Quality pick and roll facilitator. I like him there, which a lot of 6'10", 6'11" guys aren't. They're kind of on the other end of that. So that's an impressive thing about him. Solid ball handler with good vision. So I really like that about his game. And then the perimeter shooting is another thing that I think is nice. And he's comfortable off the ball, consistent movement. He doesn't just stand and wait. Efficient volume three ball, relatively efficient. Still room to improve the shot in the base. Like, I can't describe it, but there's just something that is a little bit wonky and it still works. Kind of a low trajectory sometimes. So there's room for improvement there for him to become a really, really good shooter instead of an impressive one. And then I think two more quick pluses for him. He's willing to drive to the rim, and sometimes the finishing is a little bit erratic, but for a guy who doesn't have much mass on his body, he's not afraid to do that. He has a decent burst for a guy that big. And then team defense, he's intelligent, rotates well, plays his angles. Like, even in one-on-one matchups, he knows his limitations and he understands that and plays smart defense because of it. And then pretty decent anticipation. So there's a lot to like about this kid.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned his burst, and I was actually really surprised to see the way he could drive to the basket. He has a fantastic foot speed as well. We mentioned that with Jalen Green, and I think Jalen Green would blow him out of the water in a 1v1 race. But he's got good strides. I mean, 6'10", but he looks coordinated when he's running, just in a straight line, and that translates well to his driving ability. And I think you're right. Around the rim, he's another guy that shies away from contact, and that kind of forces him into making some awkward, or trying some awkward layups and finishes. And you could definitely use some consistency there. But again, 6'10", 170 pounds, like, the contact is really going to throw him off, right? So the driving ability is fun. He moves like a gazelle, kind of those long strides around defenders. I'm not comping him to Giannis at all, but just watching watch his bottom half when he's driving to the basket, and there's some similarities there. They're, again, not the same player. Don't
Evan, I think you just called him Giannis. And I'm gonna cut that clip and tweet it out.
Yeah, please do. But I won't mention Giannis again in this analysis here, but yeah, really like that ability to put pressure on defenses getting to the basket. And you mentioned his passing. He's a multi-tool player, and he can definitely find open players. He makes some flashy passes, some kind of goofy looking passes that work. Almost like you see Jokic make some funny passes sometimes, just like you don't expect him to make them. He's not even looking at the player he's passing to, and yeah, whatever it is, just a great passer. And you mentioned his defense as well, and I think I was really impressed by his ability to defend multiple positions.
Hmm.
He laterally great mover, vertically great mover, but he's actually deceivingly strong in the post. There were a couple times he got posted up, and he uses his lower half really well to create some leverage and to keep guys from backing him down. Now, maybe some of the guys he's playing against aren't as strong as NBA post players, and we'll see what happens at the next level. But the fact that he was able to hold his own in the post despite kind of a smaller frame, pretty exciting. Pretty exciting about a pretty exciting potential at that defensive end.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to note that because he held his own, and I didn't expect that to happen. Um, there were a lot of unexpecteds with him. Where
Yeah.
heading in, I was like, like I took a look at like the first few minutes of film, and I'm like, this guy, I think I have him figured out. And then like the more I watched, I was like, wow, this dude's actually like has a new layer to his game that I didn't think, or oh, he can do this, and I didn't think he could, or oh, he's faster than I thought, or blah blah blah. Like there's just a bunch of potential with him and a bunch of stuff that just looking at him or his profile or his first couple minutes you wouldn't expect.
Right. So on the uh, so with question marks, excuse me, with question marks, we talked about that he doesn't really like contact at the rim,
Yeah.
right? And it affects the finishing negatively. The shooting consistency, you talked about the form. It's a little bit goofy, but he looks comfortable and confident shooting it. It's just a matter of can he knock it down at a higher rate? 37% from the field, 33% from beyond the arc. Those numbers aren't bad necessarily, but
Hmm.
you'd like to see him become a little more consistent from out there. I have down that he's not necessarily a tenacious rebounder. Yeah, he averages 4.8 rebounds in just 26 minutes. Um, but he's 6'10". He should, maybe it's a physicality thing,
Hmm.
but definitely want to see him be able to grab some extra boards with that size, especially if he's one of one or two bigs on the floor on an NBA offense or defense. And then I've got down, yeah, he's a great defender, but he's not always locked in
Hmm.
defensively. Maybe focuses a lot more on the offensive end than he does on the defensive end, but he's capable.
Yeah. My two question marks for him. Can he refine his on-ball game? I'd like to see some more self-creation moves and aggression in terms of the mid-range and stuff like
Yeah.
that from him, which that's a big ask for a guy that is so young and has a specific profile. But also, are we going to chalk up the turnovers on tape to youth? There were some, and I think that's a fair thing to chalk it up to that. That happens with a lot of players. They just try fun stuff, and he's one of those guys. But the difference with him and guys that have silly turnovers is I believe he can make those plays one day and actually has the potential to fire those passes in compared to some guys where they just get a little careless with the ball. I think he's just trying to improve on the fly, and there's nothing wrong with that because you have to fail in order to succeed sometimes. And then is he merely a off ball movement, spot up type player? I don't think he is. But it's going to be a test at the NBA level to see what he can do with the ball in his hands. It's not like a Scotty Barnes situation where he doesn't have the three ball or he doesn't have the burst or whatever. Depending on where he plays, and that's my second question mark, just what's his ultimate position or role in the NBA? Like he's kind of big for a three in terms of length, light for a four, but did hold his own in the post, like you mentioned. There's defensive pros and cons of each of those positions. How big can his offensive role get? How is he going to be used in the interim? Like he's just an interesting player, and none of these things are huge question marks that are going to define his career or that can hold him back significantly. But there's just a lot to process with him and a lot to like about his game that depending on the team, and this has been a really team centric pod or recording now. It just depends, and that's not a bad thing sometimes.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. My summary of Vrenz is basically this: he's a multi-tool offensive player with some aspects of his game, including consistency, still developing, and he's a defensive player, or a multi-tool defensive player as well. That again, there's some space to develop physically and mentally at the next level, but he's a good player. And Jordan, if you look at mock drafts, he's normally not in the first round. Um, Sometimes pops up in the second round. Um, I keep wondering after watching the film. I think, man, this guy is good, and we went over this with Ja'Cory McLaughlin as well. Like, these are really good players that are they getting overlooked, or are we missing something? Why do you think with Vrenz specifically, why do you think he doesn't pop up on a whole lot of mock drafts or like NBA draft.net, which I hate to reference them, but they don't
Sure.
have anything there. Like, what are we missing?
Not that I have studied those boards really in depth, because I haven't. Like, I've looked at them to see like where players like Vrenz are, but the numbers, maybe could the numbers be partially a reason why, like a guy that didn't get a ton of minutes necessarily. But then I'm sure there are players on that list who have worse numbers, or like a Jonathan Kuminga who has really inefficient numbers. But then again, Kuminga is a totally different ballpark of potential and player. But I don't know. Could it be being a foreign player kind of naturally makes him second fiddle to some guys over here? The numbers, maybe. Could it be that the program he's playing for? I just don't know. Like, there's a bunch of things that I wish I could sit down with like a panel
Yeah,
of scouts
exactly.
or website people, not to like target them and say, hey, what's going on here, but hey, what do you see in this player, and why isn't he on your list, or whatever? Because out of 60 players, he's a top 60 player. I would
I
draft him
agree.
absolutely,
Yeah.
but I think it was, and I don't want to miscredit. I'm not even going to say which side it was on because I can't remember, but he was like 59th, and he
Mhm.
finally snuck into the second round of the draft. So I was happy to see that, but because I try to look up these players after I do my evaluation to see what other people
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
It's hard to find stuff on him and the next guy we're going to talk about. Even Ja'Cory, there doesn't seem to be a lot. And I know that we're not like pioneers of basketball scouting, so there's got to be people out there that have a shared appreciation for these guys, but maybe it just isn't um, published or
Yeah.
whatever. It seems like Twitter is more of a place for that, and I'm sure that people have talked about Vrenz on Twitter and said that he's a great player and needs to be drafted, but online it's just a little bit different, I guess.
Yeah. I'm with you, man. It's a great explanation. I think, and you kind of mentioned this too, like maybe a question mark is what is an NBA team going to do with him?
Yep,
Like, what,
exactly.
are you going to give him the ball and let him be your facilitator right away, or can he play off the ball? You mentioned that as a question mark too. Like, what can he do off the ball? I don't know, but I really like Brent's. I hope that he does get drafted. I hope we see him um, playing in a big role at some point down the road. So let's move on. Well, do you want to give a summary? I know I gave a summary. Do you have a summary?
I already closed out my notes. I think I had him as pretty much what you said, like a guy who um, just does a lot of fun stuff and has good potential. But just figuring out what to do with that is going to be the challenge, and that's a good challenge to have. I mean, you have a guy that does a lot of good, and figuring out how to bring the best out of him. That's what they're there for.
Awesome.
With the third pick. With the fourth pick.
Crashing the boards.
Select.